Greetings and welcome back to 303 and Junior English. We turn now in our hymnals to pages 1334, 1335 and following, and we'll be introducing you now to the poet William Stafford and his text, Traveling Through the Dark. If you're looking with me on page 1335 quickly, you will see the dates of 1914 to 1993. It's significant if you want to just make a note to go back and look at how many poets and writers we've studied in our textbook in the last few weeks who were born in 1914. It's kind of a fascinating bit of trivia. All right, let's take a look. William Stafford grew up in Kansas. When the Great Depression struck, he traveled with his family from town to town selling newspapers, working in the fields and finding whatever work they could. These childhood experiences would greatly influence Stafford's poetry, both in its theme and its use of unadorned language. So this in some ways puts him in the camp of like a Carl Sandburg and a Walt Whitman, who grew up seeing hard work and living somewhat in a life of poverty, and so that will inform the way he sees the world. The next heading is Conscientious Objector. A believer in the sanctity of life, Stafford served in World War II as a conscientious objector. In other words, he refused to go and actually fight. In this role, he performed tasks such as fighting fires, building roads, cultivating crops. Stafford's experiences during this time are described in his memoir, Down in My Heart, published in 1947. After years of working for the U.S. Forest Service, Stafford published his first volume of poetry, West of Your City, in 1960. He was 46 years old at the time. In that book and others, Stafford's poems focus on a range of subjects including the threat of nuclear war, the beauty of nature. His accessible conversational style invites readers to appreciate the simple elegance of the everyday while considering deeper issues. Writing about Stafford in Babel to Byzantium, a book of critical essays, poet James Dickey described Stafford's work as, quote, mystical, half-mocking, and highly personal daydreaming about the western United States, end quote. Stafford's other poetry collections include The Rescued Year in 66, Stories That Could Be True, New and Collected Poems, 77. In 1970, he was appointed consultant of poetry to the Library of Congress, a position now known as Poet Laureate of the United States. Let's jump over to 1334 quickly in the literary analysis information. At 2B, the literary works presented here are lyric poems. We're talking now about Traveling Through the Dark, Secret, and the Gift. We've got 3 poems we're about to study. A lyric poem expresses the thoughts and feelings of a single speaker and often has a lilting musical quality, as in these lines from Lee Young Lee's The Gift. I can't remember the tale, but hear his voice still, a well of dark water, a prayer. Lyric poems are usually relatively short, but have great depth. The theme or essential meaning, what we do at level 2A, of such a poem is often multifaceted. The precise, nuanced language of many lyric poems may even help to express multiple themes. In most lyric poems, the theme emerges as a flash of insight or understanding. Although this flash, also known as an epiphany, that's a word you want in your notes in 2B. Epiphany may seem sudden. The details of the poem lead the reader gradually and steadily towards the new understanding. The epiphany is usually accompanied by a shift in perspective. The speaker may face up to a loss, make a decision, or simply see something in a new light. The reader, too, experiences the epiphany alongside the speaker and comes away from the lyric poem feeling as if he or she has been on a small but meaningful journey. It's significant then to write this down at level 2 as we begin with Traveling Through the Dark, that we're going to ask, what is the epiphany in this poem? What is it that you as a reader learn along with obviously the speaker of the poem? Under reading strategy, you can see that we're going to focus on interpreting lyric poetry, looking for a central image or idea that's introduced and revisited throughout the poem. Okay? Our vocabulary words there, we want to pay attention to those at the bottom of 1334 as well. All right, let's go ahead now and turn to the poem itself, Traveling Through the Dark, on page 1337. Let's just read together and then we'll exegete, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin to play a game with you where I go ahead and I just read the poem with you. You follow along closely. And then when I'm finished, I'm going to ask that you at level 1 are able to simply write down what happens, literally summarize, in this poem. Do you got me? So let's go to work, see how well you do. Traveling Through the Dark. Traveling through the dark, I found a deer dead on the edge of the Wilson River Road. it is usually best to roll them into the canyon. That road is narrow. To swerve might make more dead. By glow of the taillight, I stumbled back of the car and stood by the heap. A doe, a recent killing. She had stiffened already, almost cold. I dragged her off. She was large in the belly. My fingers touching her side brought me the reason her side was warm. Her fawn lay there, waiting, alive, still, never to be born. Beside that mountain road, I hesitated. The car aimed ahead its lowered parking lights. Under the hood purred the steady engine. I stood in the glare of the warm exhaust, turning red. Around our group, I could hear the wilderness listen. I thought hard for us all, my only swerving, then pushed her over the edge into the river. Now, this is an interesting poem, so jot down at level 1, can you jot down the things that happen in this poem? What specifically happens in this poem? And then we'll begin to talk about level 2A and 2B. Let's first of all, though, notice that we've got certain understanding of some stanzas. Do you see it? Let's go ahead and just work through each stanza at level 1. Stanza 1, traveling through the dark, I found a deer dead on the edge of the Wilson River Road. Notice he speaks about the Wilson River Road the way we might talk about Ten Sleep Canyon or something. In other words, it's something that he knows about. He kind of assumes you know as well. It's usually best to roll them, the dead deer, into the canyon. That road is narrow. To swerve might make more dead. What does that mean, to swerve might make more dead? Yeah, right. If you try and miss the deer, you may end up running off the road. We're very familiar with this idea, aren't we, where we live, right? Look at the next one. By glow of the taillight, I stumbled back of the car and stood by the heap, a doe, a recent killing. She had stiffened already, almost cold. I dragged her off. She was large in the belly. So he gets back to the back of the car. Using the light from the taillights, he's able to make out that this is a doe and that she recently was killed. My fingers touching her side brought me the reason. Her side was warm. Her fawn lay there, waiting, alive, still, never to be born. So in other words, he realizes there's a baby inside of this doe who will never be born. What to do? What to do? And then he says it. Beside that mountain road, I hesitated. What does that mean, do you think, he hesitated? I've had students that read this and go, hesitate about what? What's there to hesitate about? Well, one question might be, do you just go ahead and push the deer off the road? Do you leave the deer where you found it? Do you maybe try and do something to help to birth the fawn, right? The car aimed ahead its lowered parking lights. Under the hood purred the steady engine. So you can get a sense that he's kind of standing there figuring out what to do, and he can hear the engine right underneath the hood of the car. And then line 15, I stood in the glare of the warm exhaust turning red. Of course, the turning red here means that the smoke of the exhaust and the smoke of the taillight, or the light of the taillights, make him turn kind of red, right? A strange color as he's standing there. Around our group, and of course, let's make sure, he's all by himself. By group here, what do we mean? Right, we mean the two deer, right? Or the doe with the fawn inside. Around our group, I could hear the wilderness listen. Right? So in other words, he's standing there, quiet, trying to figure out what it is that he's supposed to do. I thought hard for us all, notice the dash, my only swerving dash. In other words, he says, I was pretty confident about everything right up to this moment. Well, what's the problem with just pushing the deer off the side of the road and into the river? There's a live doe inside, right? A live fawn inside the doe, right? Then the last line of the poem, I pushed her over the edge into the river. End of poem. That's the poem. That's the entire poem. What are your thoughts about at level 2A? What do you want to say about this? Why is it such a difficult choice? Jot that one down at 2A. Why is this a difficult choice for him? Like he goes to the back of the car. He sees the doe there. He knows there's a fawn inside, and he has to make this somewhat difficult decision to push the doe off into the river, or to try and be safe. Let's list some possible themes or messages here, and of course the epiphany here. 1. Obviously, he makes the decision. It's a hard one for him, but he makes the decision to go ahead and remove the deer from the road because he's interested in saving more lives to come. So instead of messing around with this doe and its fawn still inside the belly of the doe, he decides we've just got to make sure that we clear the area so other people are not put in harm's way, other drivers. A second possible message here. Sometimes important decisions in life, let's write this one down, are very difficult to make. Very hard to make. It's not easy. We might say that some of the important choices in life are not so clear cut. There's another possible way to say it. They're not so clear. They're not so easy. It's kind of hard. There's no right way always. Finally, of course, let's study the opening line of the poem and the title, Traveling Through the Dark. And let's point out that in this poem, he's kind of like confused and uncertain, like he's in the dark. And there's no place to go for an answer other than himself. And he's got to kind of make his decision, and then he gets to live with that decision, one way or the other. Let's talk about this poem at 2B, the rhetoric, for just a second. Of course, notice that you've got a word picture here of a decision that he has to make. It's created in real time. I mean, it's just like all of us that live out here in the West, we know this kind of thing. We've all kind of been in this situation before. We'll talk about it here in a moment at 3B, where you have to decide what you're going to do with a deer that maybe is in the middle of the road, and so it's kind of dangerous as to what exactly it is that you're supposed to do. What makes this more difficult is, of course, there's a baby, a fawn, inside of the doe. So the question is, well, what do you do in this kind of a situation? Because to push the deer over and into the river will obviously mean that the fawn is going to die a somewhat disgustingly tragic death as well, right? So, what do you do? Notice how the word picture creates then this powerful insight of the decision making and how hard it is sometimes to make a decision. At 3A, jot down, what is for you your favorite song about making hard choices? What is for you in your playlist the song about when it's really tough and you got to make a decision? What is that song for you? What is your favorite movie about making a hard choice, where the protagonist in the film has to make a difficult decision? Of course, at 3B, it's a simple question, isn't it? Do you agree or do you disagree with the decision here that's made, and why? What would you do in a situation like this? And the other 3B question we might ask is, when was the last time that you had to make a similar kind of difficult decision? Now, it might not have had anything to do with deer on the side of the road, but when was the last time you had to make a pretty tough decision? And you were trying to figure out what was the best way to go. And the key here is you had no one else to rely on. You were all by yourself and you had to make the decision in real time. When was the last time that happened for you? What was the decision that you made? And are you still proud of that decision? Because, of course, the speaker in our poem about this decision, one of the obvious questions is, do you think that he's still proud of that decision? Or is it not a matter of being proud? It's maybe more a matter of, I had to do what I had to do. When was the last time you had to make a decision like that? Where looking back on it, you would say, I had to do what I had to do. And there's no real way around that. Well, there you go. William Stafford's poem, Traveling Through the Dark. Thank you.